Today we'll be working on a project called Bridging Cultures with Impressionism. This project was created for the 4th grade level by Yashni, Brenda, Caitlin, and Carly. The project will use watercolors and is inspired by the Impressionist movement.
Impressionism is a 19th century art movement. Impressionists did not want to paint a realistic picture, but an impression of what they could see. These artists used thick layers of paint and fast brushstrokes. Before this movement, artists usually painted in a studio and created perfect landscape scenes. This is when they could capture a moment in time through painting with the use of light and color. Japanese men, also known as Japanese art, had a huge influence on the Impressionism art movement, as well as other art movements.
Something else that's notable about Impressionist works is that they're transitory, meaning they capture a moment in time. Impressionism was influenced by Japanese art. Here you see two pieces of art by two different artists. The first is Takahashi Hiroki's Cherry Blossom at Riverside, and the second is Underman Bridge at Fukagawa by Hokusai. These art are classified as ukiyo-e art, which was art that was printed on wood blocks, and it inspired much of the Impressionists of the Western world. The craze for Japanese art in Europe was given the French nickname Japonisme. One artist who was especially inspired by this Japanese art was Claude Monet.
Oscar Claude Monet was born on November 14, 1840, to December 5, 1926. He is known as one of the most famous Western painters of all time. Monet was the founder of Impressionist painting, creator of the iconic water lily series, and a symbol of French painting. Monet not only painted the water lilies, but he planted them too. The term Impressionism is derived from the title of his painting, Impression, Soleil Levant, which was exhibited in 1874. Monet didn't just base his landscape gardening on Japanese styles. His painting subjects and methods were also greatly influenced by Japanese art. Take this hiroshige woodcut. Does it seem familiar? Japanese colored woodcuts, such as this scene, with its detailed close-up of purple wisteria blossoms falling gracefully along a pool with an arched bridge, beyond inspired Claude Monet's painting of his water lily garden.
Let's learn more about Monet's artwork. Here we're going to compare and contrast Monet's bridge with Hiroshige's artwork. What do you notice that's similar? Perhaps you notice brilliant colors. Perhaps you notice subtle techniques to create an impression of what the artist saw, not necessarily a perfect recreation or rendering of what they saw.
Bienvenue! Welcome to the garden of Claude Monet. It's in the French countryside, about 50 miles from Paris, and it's a garden the artist designed himself. Imagine standing on this bright turquoise bridge. What do you see looking down? Lily blossoms in creamy yellow, pink, and white, perhaps with frogs under them? Reeds and flowering plants around the edges of the pond, where birds might perch.
Let's look more closely at an image from that video. The art we're going to create today will also feature flowers and plants. What colors do you see that you think Monet may have used? Maybe you see soft yellows, pinks, purples, blended together. Perhaps not. What tools and techniques do you think could create the impression of flowers? Let's reflect. In the video, we also learned about how Monet created the effect of the reflection in the water. Looking at the detail in this close-up, how do you think he achieved this? How could you do this in your own artwork? Brush strokes? What other tools could you use? Maybe a Q-tip? These images are of the Japanese garden at the Huntington Library in California. This garden showcases landscaping that is traditional in Japanese culture. Just like the Impressionist movement, these gardens were influenced by traditional Japanese culture and art. Do you think Monet and other Impressionists would have been inspired by these landscapes? These are the landscapes that we're going to capture in our artwork today. We'll be painting the bridge at the Huntington Beach Library. Here's a quick tutorial to show us how to start this project.
For this project, you're going to need a watercolor paper, a watercolor palette, a round brush, a cup for water, a pencil and eraser, some colored pencils, and cotton swabs. Start by drawing a wavy line to represent the water. Then draw another line at the top to represent the ground. For the bridge, draw a big semicircle. Draw a slightly smaller one underneath that. Then draw a total of 6 rectangular shapes along the bridge to represent the posts. Connect the posts with more semicircles. This will create the railings of the bridge. Then draw some more rectangular shapes underneath the bridge. Once your drawing is done, it's time for the watercolor. Start by mixing some greens, blues, and yellows to create a pond. Use your round brush for this part. While that dries, dip your Q-tip into the water and use the brown to the place where you want your trees to be. Make sure to use short brushing motions or dotting to create that impressionistic style. And don't forget to get in between the bridge railing areas. Use some greens and yellows in a dotting motion to represent the leaves. Then fill the space with some grass or dirt. Don't forget to add a sky. Here I use some blues and some purples. Once the pond area is dry, you can create some bushes and flowers in the foreground. From here you can go over and add things like flowers, lily pads, and rocks, or anything you might see in this area. Lastly, once your work of art is dry, you're going to want to use colored pencils to color in the bridge. I used brown and a darker brown to create some shading. And once you're done, your artwork should look something like this.
Here's a closer look at the finished product. Here's another example. Have fun creating, artists!